the world holds its breath. Here, on this vast, unforgiving expanse of Alaskan wilderness, two of the planet's most formidable and polarizing figures prepare to meet. The date is August 15th, 2025. President Donald Trump of the United States and President Vladimir Putin of Russia, two men who have dominated headlines and shaped destinies, are set to convene on ground freighted with the immense weight of history. The choice of Alaska for this summit is a masterstroke of political symbolism. It is a land of echoes. We must look back 158 years to 1867, when the Russian Empire, seeking to bolster its treasury and divest from a territory it could not defend, sold this immense landmass to the United States for a mere $7.2 million. Today, on that very soil, President Putin arrives not as a seller but as a negotiator, determined to orchestrate his own territorial deal, carving up a sovereign nation in a different continent. The irony is potent, a historical resonance that hangs heavily over the proceedings. This location is also a matter of cold, hard expediency. The United States is not a signatory to the Rome Statute, the treaty that established the International Criminal Court. At the heart of this summit lies a brutal and uncompromising agenda: the dismemberment of Ukraine. The proposals on the table are not about subtle border adjustments, they are about the fundamental redrawing of the map of Eastern Europe. President Putin's position, relayed through envoys ahead of the meeting, is stark and unambiguous. He demands that Ukraine cede the entirety of the eastern Donbas region, encompassing both Luhansk and Donetsk, along with formal recognition of Russia's 2014 annexation of the Crimean Peninsula. This is not a negotiation in the traditional sense. It is an ultimatum, a demand for Kiev to surrender nearly a fifth of its sovereign territory in exchange for a cessation of hostilities. In response, President Trump has introduced his own controversial concept, one that has sent tremors through diplomatic circles. He has spoken of a deal that would involve territorial exchanges, a swapping of territories, as he put it, framed as a pragmatic solution to the betterment of both Russia and Ukraine. Standing in defiant opposition is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. His response has been swift, categorical, and rooted in the principle of national sovereignty. Beyond the official agenda of war and peace, a current of unspoken intentions and sensational speculation flows beneath the surface of the Alaska summit. The very ground upon which the leaders meet fuels a narrative that extends far beyond Ukraine. For Russian nationalists, Putin's presence in the former Russian-American territory is a symbolic victory. It plays directly into a deeply rooted sense of historical grievance, the idea that Russia has been repeatedly wronged and diminished by the West. This meeting on formerly Russian soil is also a carefully calibrated act of political theater by Vladimir Putin. By drawing the American president to a location that highlights a past transaction where Russia arguably lost out, he subtly reframes the present negotiation. He's not merely a supplicant asking for sanctions relief, he is a historical actor, a leader of a great power engaging its equal on ground that carries a shared, if contentious, history. Meanwhile, a storm of concern gathers in European capitals. The joint statement from France, Britain, Italy, Germany and others was a clear and coordinated warning shot across the bow. To understand the Alaska summit, one must understand the two men at its center. This is not merely a meeting of offices, but a collision of two distinct strategic minds, each forged in the crucible of their unique histories and ambitions. Vladimir Putin, the former KGB agent, views the world through the lens of history, power, and national destiny. He is a canny negotiator, a student of the long game. He sees himself as a hunter, patiently stalking his prey, exploiting weakness and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. His narrative is one of restoring Russia's greatness, of righting perceived historical wrongs, and of pushing back against what he views as decades of American encroachment. In contrast, Donald Trump is the consummate deal-maker, a product of the high-stakes world of New York real estate. His worldview is transactional, focused on the immediate win, the headline-grabbing agreement. He approaches geopolitics not as a complex web of historical alliances and obligations, but as a series of negotiations where leverage is everything, and the ultimate goal is to emerge with a deal that he can brand as a personal victory. Their negotiating styles are a study in contrasts. Putin is methodical, prepared, and deeply versed in the details of history and geography, using them as weapons to frame his arguments and create a compelling, if distorted, narrative. Trump, on the other hand, relies on instinct, charisma, and the power of his personality. He seeks to dominate the room, to keep his counterpart off balance with unpredictability, and to simplify complex problems into straightforward binary choices. He is less interested in the fine print than in the grand gesture. From the chancelleries of Paris to the halls of government in Warsaw, a palpable sense of dread hangs over Europe. The Alaska summit is viewed not with optimism, but with deep and profound anxiety. For European leaders, this meeting represents a potential nightmare scenario. Two powerful outsiders deciding the fate of their continent's security architecture. The joint statement issued by the leaders of France, Germany, Britain, Italy, Poland and Finland was more than a diplomatic formality. It was a plea, a desperate attempt to assert their relevance and defend the principles that have underpinned European stability since the end of the Second World War. For the nations on Europe's eastern flank, particularly Poland and the Baltic states, the stakes are even higher. These countries, which lived for decades under the shadow of Moscow, see Ukraine's fight as their own. They fear that any concession to Putin in Ukraine will only embolden him, making them the next targets in his quest to restore a Russian sphere of influence. The Alaska summit does not take place in a vacuum. It unfolds against the grim, relentless backdrop of ongoing war, a conflict that refuses to pause for diplomacy. The very announcement of the meeting was tinged with the bitter taste of failure. It came on the same day that a deadline set by President Trump himself for Russia to agree to a ceasefire passed without consequence. The ultimatum, which threatened secondary sanctions, came and went. There was no ceasefire. There were no new sanctions. Instead, there was the announcement of a summit, a move that some critics saw as a reward for Putin's intransigence, a substitution of spectacle for substance. The violence on the ground continues its brutal, bloody rhythm, utterly indifferent to the high-level talks. In the days leading up to the summit, the skies over Ukraine have remained a battlefield. Over a single weekend, Russia launched more than 45 drone strikes across the country. These are not abstract military maneuvers. They have devastating human consequences. One such strike tore into a minibus, killing at least 2 people and injuring 6 more. Each explosion, each air raid siren, each newly dug grave is a stark reminder of the real-world stakes. In the grand theater of the Alaska summit, the most conspicuous figure may be the one who is not there. The entire negotiation revolves around the fate of Ukraine, yet its leader, President Volodymyr Zelensky, is relegated to the sidelines. The White House has acknowledged that it is open to a trilateral summit, a tantalizing possibility that would place Zelensky in the same room as the man who ordered the invasion of his country. However, the official focus remains squarely on the bilateral meeting requested by President Putin. This framing is telling. It positions Ukraine not as an equal participant in determining its own destiny, but as the subject of a negotiation between 2 great powers. Zelensky's absence, however, is also a form of power. By refusing to be a pawn in a superpower game and by stating his position with unwavering clarity from Kyiv, he maintains his moral authority. His video statements insisting that Ukraine's territory is non-negotiable and defined by its constitution resonate far beyond the negotiating room. He speaks not just to Trump and Putin, but to the world, reminding everyone that this conflict is about a nation's right to exist, not a real estate transaction. As the private jets depart from the Alaskan wilderness, they leave behind a world suspended between hope and trepidation. The summit, regardless of its immediate outcome, casts a long and imposing shadow over the future of global power. Has this meeting on the frozen tundra heralded a new dawn of pragmatic peace, a moment where bold leadership broke a bloody stalemate? Or has it ushered in a lingering twilight, an era where the foundational principles of national sovereignty and international law are sacrificed for the illusion of stability? This is the question that now echoes from Washington to Kyiv, from Moscow to Brussels. If a deal has been struck along the lines of territory for peace, it will be hailed by some as a triumph of diplomacy, a testament to President Trump's ability to end a war that others could only prolong. It would stop the daily bloodshed and on the surface resolve a vexing global crisis. But this peace would come at a staggering price. It would legitimize the idea that a powerful nation can invade its neighbor, seize its land, and eventually have its conquest ratified by the international community. The meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin has not provided a simple answer. Instead, it has drawn the battle lines for a new era of geopolitics. Whether this moment is remembered as the beginning of a lasting peace or the beginning of the end of the post-war order, one thing is certain: the world that emerges from the shadow of this summit will not be the same as the one that entered it.